Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Wonderful to see everyone here on a lovely sunny Monday morning. Long may it last. So today's learning is sponsored for a refuah shalema, a speedy recovery for Yaakov Mordechai ben Rachel, and by the Fabians as a mazel tov for their daughter's bat mitzvah. So the celebration keep going. Sorry, granddaughter. I may be younger than you are. Your granddaughter, Jessica's wonderful bat mitzvah. So the celebrations keep going, which is great. Thank you. And we should always share simchas together. Yeah, that's really what it's about, right? Really. So yesterday we began the month of Nisan, which is the month of our redemption and our freedom. So it just feels like spring is in the air. There's just this wonderful sense around us. And I hope that we can all use this time in this space and actually the next few weeks to really get excited about Pesach. I really don't like the narrative that we all talk about, like, oh, Pesach is coming, I've got some. Yes, we all have such cupboards. Yeah, you don't need to clean your cupboard, just close them and sell them. It works. But it's, you know, this inner need to spring clean. I always think spring cleaning is a really good idea to do between Pesach and Shavuot. You have 7 weeks. That's a great time. In the run up to Pesach, the idea is really to try to connect to what's going on over that day. And I know it's the tradition that, you know, the mother of the household often, or whoever's kind of in charge of running Pesach, you know, is so exhausted by Seder night that they're falling asleep. Yes, it happens in my home too, and it does happen in our house sometimes. But actually, I think then we're missing the point, aren't we? We are celebrating our nationhood. There's something so special about Pesach. And the idea really is that we should be able to go into that time and appreciate the freedom and appreciate the beauty. I'm going to start by sharing some amazing emails. Keep them coming. I love it. It's amazing. So I'm going to share a few. I got quite a few this week, which is wonderful. So, hi, Jacqueline. Hope you're having a good week. I can't make Monday's group as I will be away, but wanted to let you know I'm enjoying the group and feel I'm getting so much from the meetings. This might not be about faith, but I just wanted to share what happened to me this week. It is about faith. It's perfect. I met my friend in Kenwood and went for a walk, and we were saying how beautiful this blossom and magnolia trees are at the moment. I said to my friend, I have a stunning magnolia tree in my front garden, but it hasn't blossomed this year. When I drove home after our walk, I pulled up in my driveway to the picture below. So what I truly feel is that sometimes we see things, we aren't really opening our eyes and hearts and appreciating them. Sometimes you need to stop, wake up, and really smell the roses. My magnolia tree in my front garden is so beautiful. I just don't open my eyes to see it. Enjoy the photo. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. As you leave today, there's at the corner of Richfield, outside in Neil and Laura Samuel's home, there's the most magnificent tree. And again, like, unless you're looking and paying attention to it, do you know when last year, I think when I really noticed it, when all the beautiful leaves, the flowers had fallen to the floor. And that's such a shame, like it was there the whole time. We do need to just stop and just look at the world around us. Take a breath, enjoy the world. It's amazing. Hi, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for sharing the recordings of the Emunah sessions. It has been wonderful keeping up with them while I haven't been able to get to the sessions, hopefully next Monday. Having just listened to number 4, a certain part really resonated with me, so I wanted to elaborate on my previous email a little. During the week of Shiva and for quite a long time afterwards, I felt particularly close to Hashem. I wasn't able to analyze it at the time, but looking back, I think I was in a special state. When people came to the Shiva and cried, I offered them tissues and comfort. People kept saying what an amazing example I was to everyone and how on earth could I act the way I did. Now I think I can see why. Weeks later, I remember visiting a friend during Shiva whose husband had passed away. She just looked at me and asked how I could possibly get myself to her house and manage to get through the front door. To this day, I remember my embarrassment and how I said that this wasn't about me, it was about her. This happened quite a lot when I went to a Shiva. I couldn't understand why anyone thought I was special. Now I know. I have been blessed by Hashem to marry again and have a simply wonderful life. The first couple of years after meeting and marrying, we said every single day how lucky we both were, and still often say it today. From the depths of our despair came something wonderful. You just never know what Hashem has in store. With very best wishes. And we're going to try and come back to the idea we shared at the end of last week, because I don't think we had enough time to hear from you about it. But that was a really powerful example, this idea of sometimes in the depths of challenge or darkness, we see the most faith comes out for people. So we'll see if we can revisit that. Another wonderful email. I was thinking about when I might have experienced the hand of God in my life recently, and thought about last Sunday afternoon when I performed in a concert given by the Zemel Choir at the Betty and Asher Loftus home in Brian Barnett. It was an afternoon tea for residents of several homes operated by Jewish Care, and I didn't realize until recently that my mum was going to be one of the attendees. She recently started going to a recently formed singing group at her home, which I encouraged, as singing is so good for mental health. And she always loved to sing in her younger days. It turned out to be preparation for a sing-along session together with the choir on Sunday afternoon. The home provided transport for her and a small number of the other residents to enable them to attend, and she was very excited about it. We sang our first set and were then invited to join at whichever table we wished to sing together with the guests. Standing holding my mum's hand and singing Sunrise, Sunset is a moment I will never forget. Also included in the repertoire was Oh, What a Beautiful Morning from South Pacific, one of my late father's favorite songs. A moment to remember and treasure. What I love about that is, if we, again, like the magnolia tree, if we just open our eyes to seeing these small things that just happens to be, right? There's the word in English we say coincidence, right? So is there ever such a thing as coincidence? One of the names of God we know is a Yud and a Hey. And we don't say Hashem's name. So instead of saying Yud and Hey together, if we were just talking about it in prayer, we can say it, but we wouldn't say God's name just for whatever. So the way that we say, instead of saying a Yud, we change it into a Ka. So we'd say Hashem's name, we say Ka. Instead of saying his name Yud and Hey, we say Ka, just if you're talking about it, right? So like people will say, instead of saying Elohim, which is Hashem's name, they'd say Elokim. We often change it to Ka. So, what is coincidence? It's Ka, Hashem's presence in the instance, right? If you're looking for it, there's no such thing as Hashem is there.
One might think there's no such word in Hebrew.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it can't be, there's just happenstance.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is someone who's listening to our recordings. Just listen to Emunah session 3, incredible. I knew you were amazing. I'm finding these sessions much needed, relatable and valuable guidance for where I am struggling. May you go from strength to strength. So please God, our group should continue. Around 25 years ago, I was really struggling with a very difficult challenge. I found out something today that proved it was a huge and vital bracha, kindness of Hashem. And for the first time, and so grateful that I went through it. Getting my head around the fact that it's taken 25 years of thinking it was such a bad thing, and was given the realization today that it was definitely a bracha. I tried to read a page a day of the wonderful Living Emunah books, and happened to finish one of the books just yesterday. Happens, right? Again, happens stuff. It's a work in progress, but I guess by deepening my Emunah, I hope to see more bad things as from Hashem and for my own good. Sometimes I will get to see they were good, but not always, and that's okay. 25 years later. Quite interesting. We don't always get that gift that you get to see the challenge that you're going through 25 years later, or 5 years later, or a year later, that actually there's something good that came. We don't always see that. But how amazing when you do that's a real gift. Okay, this is a beautiful email. It's a long one, but it's really something worth listening to. Thank you for this morning's sessions. Over the past few weeks, I have been touched and moved by everything which has been shared. However, today, my mind was buzzing. So much to unpack, so much to think about, so much to reflect upon. Thinking back, Hashem has been in my life constantly. There's not a day which goes by when I haven't thought at least once that Hashem's hand has been involved somewhere. To go back to the beginning, both my parents arrived in this country to escape Nazi Europe. They came via different routes. My mother arrived here legally on the 1st of September 1939 as a domestic with a work visa. My father came in 1940, having escaped from Czechoslovakia to Palestine, where he was interned by the British for several months, then went to France to fight. And when France was invaded, he escaped to England, where he joined the British Army. Both my parents came from religious families, and both lost most of their family in the Shoah. When I think back to my childhood, I did not have a religious upbringing. You would probably call it just about traditional, lighting candles on Friday night, going to Shul 3 times a year, and having seders and eating matzah on Pesach. Our home was not kosher. My parents' friends all had similar backgrounds, and we were the most religious of all of them. Looking back, that wasn't saying much. Yet, I felt that Hashem was in my life all the time. I totally believed then that there had to be a force greater than us, making things happen, and that when we die, it is only our body which dies. I still believe this. I had an experience which completely floored me, but that is for another time, so hopefully we'll have a follow-up letter. My parents never hid anything from me, and I was brought up with a full knowledge of what life was like pre-World War II and what had happened to our family. Whichever way I look at it now, I know that Hashem is in my life all the time. My father, who was a Kohen, was really angry with Hashem. He only intimated the fact that after I got married, the fact that he wasn't prepared to live a religious life, which my mother was happy to do, but had he agreed to it, was obvious, yet he could not let go of his Judaism. In Shul, when the Kohanim duchened, he walked out as he felt that he could not allow them to duchen over him, and he would not duchen as he said he was not religious enough to bless others. However, in his latter years, my father worked in Stamford Hill for a religious company and was extremely happy to be in that environment. My parents made sure that I went to Cheder and then a Jewish primary school. As soon as they could afford to buy a house, they moved to a Jewish area. They encouraged me to mix with Jews, and a love of Israel was instilled in me. Throughout all this, I hung on to every bit of Jewish life I could. I always told people up front that I was Jewish. I proudly wore my Magen David around my neck. I led Jewish prayers at my secondary school, where there were only a few Jewish girls. I experienced anti-Semitism, but did not shy away from countering it. I was the only Jewish student on my course at a college of over 1,000 students, and proudly supported Israel during the 6-day war. My belief in Hashem has got stronger over the years, and I have always believed that Hashem is looking over me. When it came to getting married, it mattered to me that my future husband could read Hebrew and also had a strong love of our faith. As it happened, although my husband had a religious education, he also came from a non-religious home. However, we made a decision that our home would be kosher, if nothing else, as it was important to me that anyone could eat in our home, as I was never allowed to invite friends for meals because we did not keep a kosher home. This is where I know that Hashem was really there for me. One day, just before our wedding, my father gave me a present. He had made a koshering board for our meat, exactly as he remembered his mother's one to be. In those days, you had to kosher the meat once you had bought it from the butcher. This always makes me laugh when people tell me the Rebbetzen about koshering meat, because I have no idea how to kosher meat, because I was bored once. You can't even buy non-kosher meat. So one day someone's going to give me a lesson in how to kosher meat. But it does make me laugh that it was just not, Yeah, and bat mitzvah girls all used to be shown how, and now you're just told go to the butcher and buy ready slaughtered meat.
Yes.
So yeah, but how amazing that her father, who was so angry at God, that was the wedding present that he wanted his daughter to have, was a meatball just like he had grown up with. Even though I no longer use it, I still have this cashering board. To me, this was a sign that we were beginning our marriage life on the right path. And my father, although he was angry over what had happened to the Jewish people, he had not totally lost his faith. Sadly, he passed away a couple of years later, but I know he would have been so proud to see where his family stand now as Jews. Over the years, my faith has got stronger. I know that I won't find the answers to all the questions I have. We are given many paths to follow in our lives. Free will is ours. I hope that I am following the right path. But as one of my daughters says, everything happens for a reason, although we might not understand it. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to reflect on my belief. Isn't that amazing? I feel like everyone could write a letter about their background and that, even just reading this beautiful letter, I'm thinking about the fact both of my parents had teachers in their primary school who really inspired them. And particularly my father, whose mother came from a very, very, very religious Hasidic home in Poland. And then she came here on the Kindertransport at the age of 12 and was almost adopted. I've shared this story with some of you, but was almost adopted by a Christian family. Like, where would I be today? Yeah. It's unreal to even think about it. But because she'd left her home when she was so young and the trauma of war and everything that happened to her, she married someone who was completely secular and they kept absolutely nothing. And then due to various life changes and circumstances, eventually for some reason, she moved to Hendon. I think that's where her family was living. So they lived in Hendon and she sent my father to Hasmonean Primary School. That was kind of what was done in those days. She was saved by Dr. Schonfeld. So that was the place you send your children to. It didn't matter if you were religious or not. That was where children went. And she was 12, so she wasn't 3. She remembered some things from home, obviously. And my father came home from reception and he said, we learn, or maybe year 1 it was by that time. I can't remember exactly the age, but we learned in school today that you're not meant to mix meat and milk together. So my grandma remembered, she'd grown up in a very religious home. So she started to keep kosher. And then he came home and he said, we learned that you're not meant to drive on Shabbat. So she started to keep Shabbat. And it's just amazing that we all have these cords holding us so tight and so strong back to our heritage. And I think at different stages in life, different things bring us closer to them. And for some of us, I think we've always just had that strength and that cord to hold on to. But I think different people go through challenges in life or different ways in life, and things do change. And one of the very deep thoughts that we shared at the end of last week, and I kind of gave it to you to think over, and I've been thinking through it this week as well. And I shared on the group as well, one of the videos, again, from the hostages who have been released and who we are being so inspired by, and we just continue to pray that all of them come home. But this idea of being in a really dark, difficult place and finding faith there. And I just wondered if anyone wanted to share. We've heard a lot of it through the letters that were written in, but if anyone wanted to share, if that's something that they've been reflecting on, or if there's something that really resonated with them about, like I said, it was quite a heavy space to be in. But if anyone wanted to say anything else about that before we continue with a slightly different topic. Yeah. Did you want to say something?
I don't know whether it's applicable, but we've just launched a new film, Children, Holocaust Educator. And it's very harrowing. It's for 15-year-olds. It's in 3 parts. And we launched it at JW3 last week. And they interviewed quite a few survivors. And one particular one said that they were in a concentration camp, they were very ill, they'd been beaten, they had to work very hard, And she still says every day, she looks up and says, "Where are you, God?" And quite a few said the same thing. And that has been on my mind all week.
And I think it's so, in a way, like it's what we said last week, is in a way it would be so much easier for someone who's gone through something so terrible to just say, there is no God, but that's not what she's saying. And that's what I find so fascinating. There's this asking that question, or like in this story, being angry with God isn't as comfortable as just saying, forget it. You know, he just, there is no God, there is no good, there is no, well, the life is random. In a way, it's a much easier way of looking at the world. Just, okay, you know, bad people did terrible things. The Nazis came to power, they killed Jews. People just hate Jews because they hate Jews. There's no kind of overarching plan or someone to blame. But that's not this idea of saying, you know, where are you, God? Or looking up or saying, I'm angry with God is such a powerful lesson to all of us. I think you have other people like Eli Sharabi who shared with us this idea that he's constantly saying Shema and feeling God carrying him and saved him and brought him through. But even the people who don't feel that, I think that that anger also proves God to me.
But we create anger as well. There's another thing. Ian Austin, he was a Labour MP, and he was in Parliament a few weeks ago, and they were talking about the Holocaust Memorial thing, keeps being dropped, etc., etc. And someone got up and said, "Why do we have to pay for it? All Jewish people are very wealthy, and they can sell a bit of property." There's your anger.
Yeah. And actually, someone who came to the group last week said to me that, you know, sorry, no, it didn't come through. Someone I was speaking to over Shabbat said to me, you know, that actually they've been so angry since October the 7th, and they're just starting to let go of the anger because it's not helping. No one's listening. You know, the people that you get, you can write back to these people, you can shout at them, you can send, you know, messages. They'll just block you. Then they don't want to hear. The people who want to hear have wonderful conversations with them. That's what fills us with hope and love, is when you have a conversation with someone and they want to be part of it, or they want to understand, or they're, you know, like that, those conversations when someone wants to not even be convinced, but wants to be open-minded, that fills us with so much hope. You know, when you have people who aren't Jewish who are supporting us, that's what fills us with so much hope. It's really wonderful.
How can we stop the anger? I mean, I've been angry since October the 7th.
So I think this helps. I think focusing on faith helps.
You understand.
Yeah, I think the more we try and work on our faith, the more it can help it. You can't get rid of anger. Anger's hard work to get rid of, you know. And anyone who's gone through a personal tragedy, it's normal to feel angry. Like, anger is an okay emotion to an extent. Yeah.
Who are you angry with? Are you? Okay. I'm not angry with him.
Where is he? Why again?
I understand. That's fine.
But I realise it's people.
Who are you angry with?
I'm paying with people who ignore the warnings for years. Those people who have a lot to answer.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting, because this is going to bring us back to the idea that we said everything is in the hands of heaven except for our free will. And when someone makes a free will choice to ignore, someone makes a free will choice to go and murder men, women, and children, and Holocaust survivors, and everyone else, you know, those are people making terrible decisions, and they have what to answer for. And, you know, the people who are helping to which follows us where we get the people who help to spread the vicious hate, you know, the people, the media outlets and the people online and all the different things that happen. It's going to ring again. You turned it off. The next person. So 1 second. So those, 1 second, so those people have what to answer for. And that's what, you know, when we talk about a final reckoning and that God is the judge, Hashem will make sure that those people are taken care of. And actually, even, thank God, we have an IDF and we have a country that can go and that can deal with terrorists and that can go and kill people who should be killed, etc. So I'm not talking about that level of things. That has to operate within the realm. What we need to think about, though, is that at the end of the day, either we're going to say that God created the world, let's say we say that, and he let us get on with it, and what a mess we've made, or we're going to say that God created the world and he controls everything that happens, which includes incredibly painful things like October the 7th and the Holocaust.
I was just thinking that being angry with the people who didn't notice and didn't take heed of the warnings, and that's why it all happened. Yes, probably. But if it hadn't have been that, it would have been something else. Because in every generation, people rise up. And the divisions that were in Israel at the time, and the divisions which are within all the communities and all the different strands of Judaism, you know, this is a warning. We can't allow divisions and people who won't go into a reform shul or won't speak to somebody who is from a different group. All this is divisive. And what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And really, we ought to be uniting, not dividing amongst ourselves. And being angry is such a waste of energy.
Exactly. So I love, Leslie, what you're saying, because actually underlying the reason behind why things happen, then we can't know the reason. No, God only knows. No. But one of the things that we do know is one of the reasons that we're told from our sources from the Talmud, the reason that we're still in exile is because of senseless hatred. Yeah. And everyone saw in the run-up to Simchat Torah of 2023, everybody saw how much senseless hatred there was between us as a people. You couldn't have a conversation in politics. You know, the amount of hate that there was just beyond. Now, do we know for sure that that's what led to October the 7th? If we wanted to, we can talk about the fact that they saw the warning signs, like Lawrence said, and they ignored them. That could be what caused October the 7th. It could be the fact that we were divided that caused October, that we don't know. But what we do know is that we, as a Jewish people, have a superpower, which is our unity. And we weren't united. And the Hamas terrorists themselves are saying that. The hostages have come back and reported, and they said, we saw you were weak. We saw you were fighting. Israel was on the brink of civil war, right? We could see it. So, like, you just, like, sometimes, like, if you need to bang your head against the wall. Like, it's so clear. They're telling it to us. It's forget that the Talmud says it. Forget that the rabbis speak about it. Hamas are saying to us, we saw your weakness. We saw your Achilles heel. We know it was there. Just 1 second. And yeah, just a little
You can put it on and do the not disturb.
Oh, go on, Michelle. How do you do that?
I think you have to press do not. Thumbs up, do not disturb.
Just there's a story in the Torah that there's a part of our Torah that we read about with Bilam that we're familiar, and you know, one of the blessings that he says instead of the curses, it's Ma tovu ahalecha Yaakov, that famous blessing of how wonderful are your tents, Jacob. But after his plan failed, right? He wanted to curse the Jews and it didn't work. After his plan failed, there's a bit of a story that not everyone notices always. He went back to Balak, the king, and he said to him, Balak, I tried my best. I can't curse the Jewish people. I just can't do it. God's not letting me, right? God puts the words in my mouth and I can't curse the Jewish people. But, he says, get them to sin. Get them to be divided. If you get them to sin and to be divided, you can do whatever you want to them. If we're strong, if we're united, we are unstoppable as a force. We are. And that's our answer. We just need to be more united. That's the answer. But going back to the faith idea, underlying it all, the emotion of being angry is a human reaction. And a lot of people feel anger. But what I was sharing was this person who said to me that I was angry. A couple of people have said to me, and I've let go of that because it's not helping. And I think that's one of the really strong parts of this is, does being angry help? Is being angry a helpful way of being? No. There's so much energy involved in being angry. But is it really helping? Is it really helping?
When you were saying about the hostages last week and how they're in the tunnels and how amazing it was that we had faith. But I think faith gave them the structure for them to hang on to.
100%.
What to do otherwise? I mean, you've got to hope that they had no idea what was going on the outside world. They had no idea that everybody was mobilising in their support. They just had to, otherwise there would lie madness and despair and, the end of everything. So I'm not surprised that they started to think, God's going to save me, because what else do they have?
What else is it? Yeah, there's that expression we say, there's no such thing as an atheist in a flock. Yeah, there's one of my favourite Jewish composers is A.B. Rottenberg. He's writes some really beautiful songs that I think I've shared some of them before. And one of them is it's quite a fun, light song, but it's talking about 3 people going to an atheist convention in LA. And they're saying, oh, I'm so excited to be staying at the Hilton. I can't wait to spend some time in Disneyland. It's going to be fascinating. We're going to talk all about, this whole, it's just done really sweetly. So the 3 people, and then halfway through, and they see this chassid who's sitting there eating kosher food, and they said, oh, can he still be so naive to still believe there's someone up there watching over you? Don't be ridiculous. And then suddenly what happens to the plane? There's a bit of turbulence and one of the engines starts failing and they're about to crash. And suddenly, what do all of them say? All 3. So one of them, spare me Allah, and then I can't remember the words. One of them is, I think so, cries out to Jesus, one cries out to Muhammad, and in Hebrew, Howard says Shema Yisrael, right? Because it's this idea that when you're really pushed to it, something inside of us, it's there. And then the end of the song is that, Peter's now a priest in Cincinnati, and Muhammad has a mosque in Sheets at Bay, and Howard's still a dentistry in Woodgreen, but now they call him Chaimel, and on Shabbos he wears a shtreimel. It's a lovely song, but it's a lovely idea. But the idea of are there really true atheists? That's the question. But I think that sometimes it is the challenge of being in that terrible place. Or like the Kabbalistic sources we were learning, that Tanya was telling us last week, God's deeper presence is in those really hard times. And I think that's the bit that people who have gone through things that have made them feel God's strength more. Yes, there's the kind of what else do you hold on to? But there's also this idea that God's deeper essence is in those tunnels with those people, was in Auschwitz with those people. This deeper sense of God, this part of God that doesn't go through the filter of everything being wonderful and everything being fine and everything being turned out okay. Saying that, we said, of course, not everyone felt faith. And actually, I shared right in the first session together, and I forgot the name of the book. Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg had quoted The Survivors something. But a lot of time, this kind of idea that survivors have resilience from faith, that is one of the reasons maybe that some people survive. It's kind of like looking into why do some people survive and some people don't. There is some part of that as well, but I think looking at that deeper side of it. Yeah.
Just what me a little bit is what about all the people that didn't come through it? They might have had great faith as well.
Yeah, 100%. So exactly. I don't think that we're saying that anyone who didn't survive didn't have faith, but it seems like it's almost like this parachute that you can hold on to, this sense of being close to God is an amazing. And also, what about people who go through challenges in life and don't find God and don't feel close to it? There's no judgment there, for sure not. But in those deeper places, that's what when we talk about that song that one of the Omer, I think, Elia Cohen, I think, sang. Afilu b'hastara shebetocha hastara. Even in the hidden, that's inside the hidden, like in the most hidden place, there you for sure can find God. That's the Kabbalah. What it really means, I don't know. I wasn't in those tunnels, but it is interesting that the people who were really connected to something deep in there or deep in there. They connected to what was deep inside of them. Okay, so we've got a few minutes. I want to share for you. Last week, the class that I shared you was from Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, and I'm going to continue to share part of his Emunah series. I'm giving it over because it's really inspiring me. If anyone wants to listen to his classes, firsthand, I would really recommend them. He's an incredible educator. But he started his series on Emunah by sharing some questions that had been written into him. And I think that's quite an interesting kind of take. If anyone wants to write in questions, it doesn't always need to be, these are kind of people who worked it all out, right? Figured out their faith, felt stronger to their faith. We had something that we're going through at the moment, a challenge where I really don't know why God's doing this. I don't understand. I'm sure maybe in a year, maybe in 25 years, I'll be able to say, oh, that's exactly why it was the right thing. But right now, it just feels like, really? Has anyone ever had that sort of experience? It's normal, right? But if there are questions that people have just generally, it's a lovely thing. So these were a few questions that different people wrote into him. Does faith begin with logic or with just faith? If it's just with faith, then how can you get this if you don't have it? Someone else wrote in, I'm a curious person, and I always ask questions about how you know it's true. And growing up, I was told eventually, Jews don't ask questions like that. Who's come across that? Right? Everyone's been told. Jews don't ask questions. I think when people say that, it means I don't know the answer. How many Cheder teachers said, we don't ask those questions? Someone told me, there's some amazing stories. Someone told me, did anyone learn this in Cheder, that when you're, or in school, when you make the bracha over the challah, you need to cover the challah? Sorry, when you make the bracha over kiddush, you need to cover the challah so that the challah doesn't. Why do we cover it? Challah doesn't get jealous. Yeah. Sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, can challah be jealous? Can challah be happy or sad? But it's true, right? That's what we're taught. And actually, there is an idea there that really you're meant to say the blessing on the challah first, and then on the kiddush, so we cover it. But when a child asks their Cheder teacher, what do you mean challah can be jealous? We don't ask questions. What does that mean? I don't know the answer. Another brilliant question. Elchanan was told this at a shiva. He shared this story, but I'm sharing, and I've shared it probably. So it's an amazing question. Someone, a 60-something-year-old man, met Elchanan. I think he'd lost his mother, so met him for the first time at the shiva. And he said he was the top of his class in Cheder, but I think he was doing really, really well. Very, very intelligent person, but he was worried that he wasn't going to do well in his bar mitzvah class, or I can't remember exactly what. There was some reason. So he thought, if I come up with a good question, then that's really going to impress them. So in his bar mitzvah quiz or whatever, I think they had like an interview after they'd done the test. He said to the rabbi, or he said to his teacher, sorry, he said, in the creation, God created, what was created on the first day? Day and night, right? And then only a few days later, God created the sun, moon, and stars. How could you have day without a sun? What did that look like? Where was the light from? Who thinks that's a good question? Who's thought of that question? Never. What a brilliant question. What did his teacher say to him? We don't ask questions about God and how God created the world. So what was really beautiful, and I don't remember what he said or what he relayed to me, at the shiva when Elchanan spoke that night, he actually addressed that question. But this young man stopped going to anything Jewish from the age of his bar mitzvah because he was put off Judaism.
I think that our generation, we weren't very fortunate with our teachers. And I think an awful lot of young people were put off good company because the teachers who were teaching them didn't have any understanding of children, basically, and the questions children will ask, and they were very harsh. You know, I can remember one particular teacher in our Cheder. I love Cheder, but I do remember this guy who would clip you round the ear if you didn't give the right answer. And I do remember my sister being in terrible trouble because he asked a question. She was in his class, and he asked a question about what we do for Rosh Hashanah. And my sister was always, you know, she was always quick with an answer. And she whispered to the boy next to her, "You get new clothes." And this boy said, "You get new clothes."
And he was right. There's a halacha that says that.
But, you know, they were
Meant to
very
get new
harsh. They were harsh. And teaching shouldn't be about that. And
So,
I was a
and
teacher.
I think there's no judgment, because do you know what people didn't know?
They
A
didn't
lot
know.
of the teachers just weren't taught properly, and I think
Yeah.
that's the real
Yeah.
challenge. But saying
It's
that,
different.
it's so interesting because it's so different to what the Jewish approach is. The Jewish, we're just
The
about to enter
kindness.
Pesach. What's the highlight of the Seder night?
The
Manage
children,
that.
the children.
Ask questions, not even the children, but ask
Asking
questions.
questions.
And do you know what, there were people in COVID who are really on their own for Seder night. Even if you're on your own, what's the halacha? Who should you ask the question?
Yeah.
You ask yourself the question, right? You ask the questions because why? Because Judaism's about asking questions.
I used to work for UJIA in Manchester, and one of my things was working with Jewish studies teachers. And I went to, it was a religious primary school. And we're talking to a guy who was teaching religious studies came in and we were having a chat. A couple of other people sitting there. And he said he was talking about a creation to his class. And he said one boy put his hand up and asked about dinosaurs. And he said it was fine because everybody laughed, so we moved on. So he just didn't want it. I was quite shocked, actually. There's got to be some sort of answer to this kid, but everybody laughs and we just left behind and moved on.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely different schools of thought, and something like that. So again, it's if the teacher's been equipped to know how to answer in a way that they're comfortable with. Not everyone is, but also sometimes, you know, I mean, we were all in school, right? I remember trying to ask questions just to wind up the teacher and get us off track. Like, we all did that, right? You know, if you can ask a question and kind of direct the conversation, it's a bit more interesting than having to go and look back in the Gemara or inside the Chumash. But I agree with you, like if it's a real genuine question, and sometimes it's a question to have outside.
Just very quickly, you said about atheists, whether you are an atheist, whatever, every Jew belongs to a club.
Yeah.
Whether they don't belong
Yeah.
to anything, they go, I'm Jewish,
Yeah.
but they're not an atheist. It's a club.
And I always challenge it.
Seder, and it's a very, very big hall for Seder night, and there's Russians, Peru, whatever. No one could speak their language of everyone else, and everybody sat with a Haggadah, and we were all united.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that.
It's amazing. Jews from all over the world. Jews from all over the world. Okay.
Notice people on a cruise. What is going on? Friday night. All over the world, the downstairs, the Jewish, and that sort of says an awful lot. Because the majority of people, service to come, book, they go, why do you get? Oh, Jewish. Yeah, that's Jewish. Someone like
Yeah. And we also love people knowing that we're Jewish. Yeah. Right, we love kind of, we call it begeling. Or like showing discreetly, it's called begeling, when you discreetly show someone that you're Jewish, just so you know and they know that you know and you know that they know. So you need them to know that you're Jewish, right?
Can I just say, I've got a hairdressing salon in Bushy, and sometimes I say to people on a good Johnson, and they look at me and they go, oh.
Oh, how did you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can see that they're like,
know. It's amazing. We do love that. Yes.
I just think it's a wonderful short. When people on a cruise or something like that, and you figure obviously that they are, and you kind of can get past all the external imagery that you wouldn't normally, well, you know, because you don't have a lot of fun. All of a sudden, oh, even what you do for did you know it? And it's lovely, this connection anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
Australia,
exactly.
see.
Yeah.
Did I share here about when we won the train to Stanmore? Did I not tell you that story? So we went to, for Ruben's birthday a few years ago, we went to see, what's it called? It's the Agatha Christie play. No, not that one.
In Venice or Witness.
No, it's Witness for the prosecution.
Yeah.
And we were on the train on the way back. Thank you. We must have been. So I mean, you can tell we're Jewish, right? I was with the rabbi and Ruben. It's pretty obvious. And there were three boys sitting like we were not directly opposite, but like three along. And they suddenly started benching, like just literally singing Hazan. It was so funny because we knew that they just wanted us to know that they were Jewish. And they went to Emmanuel College and they got off at Stanmore and they just wanted us to know that they knew that we knew. Like, okay, very good. Like, and I'm sure if we'd have spoken for a few more minutes, we would have found out how we were all related and we knew each other's family. But there's something so lovely about it.
Do you know, just sorry to interrupt, but my cousin, who's not nothing religious at all, said to me the other day, we got on the train and there was a very religious guy sitting there, and he said, just when he sat next to him, just in case someone was going to start with him. And I was like, that's so unusual for you, because no, I just want to sit there, just in case.
Because we're
I
part
was
of the
really touched about
we're
that.
part of the tribe.
Yeah.
It's an amazing
Yeah.
thing. We all feel that. We all really do. So this question that I shared with you, so this guy was curious, he asked lots of questions, and he was told we don't ask those questions. But then also he came from a very Hasidic home which spoke about all the miracles. Why do you believe, he asked? So because I saw all these miracles that happened to my Rebbe and all these amazing things that happened. So he wanted to understand, you know, what he said is I didn't understand that why all the miracles suddenly stopped when I was born. Like you all talk about these stories of miracles, and now I don't see those miracles. They're obviously not happening anymore. So is it something about me that there aren't these miracles anymore? But then he said, but then the strange thing that he noticed is, sorry, so that's what he wanted to understand, why the miracles. Someone else asked, why do we follow all these rules without understanding them? Right? Who ever thinks that? Like, is it right that we keep things and we don't really know? We don't really understand? It's tradition, right? But we're gonna come back to that. And the last question he said is this paradoxical idea that anytime I asked a question, you know, it's something to do with understanding Judaism or faith, no one knew the answer. Everyone said you don't ask those sort of questions. But suddenly, whenever tragedy happened, then suddenly everyone has a reason and everyone can explain it. And we did speak about that last time, if you remember, 2 times ago, that saying I don't know is probably the most powerful thing that we can say. Actually having reasons, knowing why things happened is wrong. And if ever it sounds like I understand why, you know, even when we talk about the division before October the 7th, we still don't know why. We know that that's bad for the Jewish people and our superpowers to be united. But do we really know why God did things? No, we don't. And interesting how this really bothered him, this idea of having both of those, the idea that we don't answer questions, but when there's a tragedy, suddenly we've got a reason and an explanation. I think that's, you know, a really challenging way to be. So Rabbi Wai shared this idea that in Jewish thought, there are 2 ways of basically approaching faith. One, and what some people think, and this is what's wrong, is some people think that faith is just blindly doing what you've been kind of told to do, what you do. It's just what we do. We don't ask, we don't question, we don't try to understand. It's just what we do. Judaism does not believe in blind faith, right? We believe that that's either laziness or stupidity. Those aren't my words, it's Rabbi Jacobson's words, right? Just saying we just do it because we do it, he's saying is either laziness or stupidity. Why? Because then that means if you would have been born into a Muslim home, you would have just done what they do there. If you were born into a Christian home, you would have just done what they would have done there. If you were born into a Buddhist home, you would have just done what they did there. If you were born into an atheist home, you would just do what you would do there. So the only reason that you keep the things you keep is just because you happen to be born into a Jewish family, very nice, keep Judaism. That's not the Jewish approach. So what is the Jewish approach? There's two very strong views, and there's a very strong debate between those views. Okay, the two perspectives actually come up in our prayers that we say all the time. We start when we let's say when we start the Amidah as an example, when we start saying our prayer right at the beginning of the Amidah. So we say Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei Avosseinu, right? Blessed are you, Lord our God and God of our fathers. So the way that he explains it is the two different approaches are in that verse. You've got our God and the God of our fathers. So you said quite correctly, tradition, right? There is an idea that the God of our fathers we know is super important. The reason that we keep things is because, not just because I happen to be born into a Jewish home, but a tradition that is steeped in values and understanding, going all the way back to where? Where do we take that tradition back to? What was the big event that we take our Judaism back to, going back all those generations? Where did it start, where we understood ourselves as people? Mount Sinai, right? The mass revelation, right? So the mass revelation, the fact that 600,000 people all heard God speak. They didn't hear someone who heard God speak. They all heard God speak. Every other religion is based on someone telling someone that they heard from God. In Judaism, 600,000 people all stood at Mount Sinai and heard God speak. So when we talk about tradition, the reason we do it is because my parents heard their parents, talking about what happened. And the original people who heard it told it to their children, who told it. And now we're about 30 or 40 generations down that everyone's, when do we tell that? When's the main night of the year where we talk about it? Seder night, right? That is when we tell our tradition. So that's one way of looking at things. That's one strand is Elokei Avotenu, this idea that it's the God of our fathers. There's a really strong tradition. If anyone wants to read more about this kind of, we'll talk about it, but there's an amazing book called Permission to Receive. There's one, Permission to Believe and Permission to Receive, by Rabbi Kellerman. We have copies, I think, in the Shul library, so if you want to borrow them. But it really goes through this idea about how that is proof of our religion, this idea of tradition and it being passed down through generation. The other way is Elokeinu, our God. It's trying to understand ourselves, trying to look more deeply into understanding God, trying to learn about faith, coming and discussing together and going on our own journey and finding God. And there's really strong views within the sages about which is the right approach. They're pretty much really very divided over whether it should be about tradition or whether it should be about you going on your own personal journey. Obviously, what we can say is we can do both, but sometimes I think that each of us, one of them will resonate more than the other. Some people are very much, what talks to them in the depths of their faith is the fact that this is something that was passed on to me from my parents and my great, you could hear it from the emails we got, right? Some people really feel that strong sense of faith. And some people really feel like they need to understand it and grapple with it and come through to it themselves. So one is through the idea of research and one is through tradition. So I just want to end with, there's a lot to kind of go into, and we'll try and look through them a little bit more. But I just want to end with just one idea. Just 1 second. So so I just want to end with an idea actually talking about Moshe. Okay, so Moshe and his father-in-law, we know that Yisro, Moshe's father-in-law, was not just he wasn't Jewish, but he was steeped in idol worship. He had kind of experienced every sort of other type of religion out there, and then came to Judaism, which is a really interesting way to come to Judaism. Some of you might have come across people like this. We had actually, when we were in Belmont, there was a family who the father was really like a real philosophical guy. I think they might live in Gateshead now, actually, but really, really philosophical guy. They came from somewhere in Eastern Europe, and he had travelled to all different countries, India, and all different religions, and he was really on a quest. He had this thirst inside of him, and eventually he picked up the Rambam, Maimonides on the Torah. Now, I have to be honest with you, if I was to open a book and read Maimonides on the Torah, I'm not sure that I would be inspired and think that Judaism is correct, because it's pretty intense. But this guy came to Judaism. The reason he converted, because he read the Rambam on the Torah. And it was fascinating to go through that journey with the family. They were already married, they had children, and his wife's father was actually Jewish. So it was interesting that this family kind of came back to it. But Yisro really was like this. He had seen everything, and he'd heard everything. And there's the story that's brought down in the Medrash, in the Mechilta, that talks about that Yisro and Moshe had a debate. And this debate kind of sounds like it comes from the very start of this type of discussion. Is it tradition, or is it finding it yourself? Which one's the right path? Like I said, there's really strong basis to go for both. So if we had a debate about it, actually, I remember in our biology A-level class, I'm not sure why we were discussing this rather than biology A-level. I don't think the teacher was very happy about it. But I do remember us having these really fierce debates about the reason that we keep Judaism is just because that's what our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents did. Or no, you have to understand it yourself. You've got to look into, and like, I just remember one of them came from a super religious family, from like Holocaust survivors, and it was very much, it's about what your family and it seeped through, kind of through her skin, was what she. And the other one came from a very traditional United Synagogue family, where you've got to figure it out, and you've got to work out, and you've got to intellectually challenge it. And it's just so interesting to think back now. They're both true, right? There's strong things to support both. But Moshe and Yisro had this debate about, is it about saying to your children that, we do this because I went, and I mean, they were in Egypt, so it's right there happening then, but this is the reason we do it? Or is it because we need to go and we need to discover and find for ourselves? And actually the sages say that they came to this debate, and what was decided was that Moshe's first son, he would go down this path. And actually, the way the Medrash says it is that Moshe agreed to Yisro that the first son would go after Avodah Zarah, which means worshipping idols. What? 1 second. What? Moshe agreed that his first child was going to be allowed to go and worship idols? That can't be. So I think it's the Chiddush Harim says that's not what it means. What it means is that he agreed with his father-in-law that he would be allowed to go and look at other religions so that it will bring him to God. He would be able to, kind of like Yisro himself had done, he would be able to go on this discovery about the world around him, to be able to find God through that. Yisro really saw the value in that. Whereas the second son, Moshe said no, and the words that they used, actually, the first son was called Gershom, which means I was a stranger there. Whereas his second son was called Eliezer, which means God helped me. Isn't it interesting that the second son bears that name of God? That's like the being deeply steeped in God being part of you. Whereas the first son, he actually said to Yisro, he would never have said to Yisro, yes, let him worship idols. That's not what it means. But what it meant is that it's okay for him to go and try to grapple with and try to find. We're not scared. That's what Yisro was saying. Don't be scared that he's going to go and find these other religions and think, oh, Judaism's not true. It's okay, because he's going to be able to see the beauty of Judaism by looking at other things. And just to end off, there's a book by an Israeli author called Uri Zohar. He was, I think he was a TV star or a pop star, something. He was a big Israeli celebrity. And I think in about the 70s, he became religious. And he wrote a book called My Friends, We've Been Robbed. And it was this idea of saying that, like, by telling us that Judaism has nothing to offer us, we were robbed. But one of the things that he wrote in his book was he said that in a way he feels worse for people who grew up only with, knowing Judaism and faith and tradition, because they think that the world out there is so exciting. He said, I grew up with none of this. And I know I grew up with what everyone thinks is important, fame and fortune and money and, all the pleasures of the world. And I came to this, and he said, I'm so lucky because I know it's all rubbish out there. I know that what we have is the most amazing thing. We have a real, true relationship with God. And I think that was the Yisro Moshe debate was, is it better to go out there, see what's out there, and then come and find Judaism and view it with so much more depth and meaning and beauty? And often you see that actually of people who grew up secular and come to faith, or grew up, less connected to Judaism and come to it. Sometimes we can learn more from them than someone who's just they seem more on fire. Have people come across that? There's something really interesting there. There's something that you can see when someone rejected it or didn't have it, and suddenly they feel it more. And it's almost like we look at them and we say like, oh, wow. But it's because we might think, well, I wonder what it would be like to. But no, right? He's saying, I've done all of that. You're so lucky with what we have. So please, God, we're going to continue talking about this idea of understanding what it means, the tradition path, understanding what it means, the knowledge path. Do the two meet, or is it okay to have both? And actually, is it okay that probably one resonates more with us than other, or are we meant to try to tap into both ways of understanding faith? So we'll continue with our journey. If everyone's happy to meet next week, I'm still in denial with the whole Pesach. I'm happy to meet again. Everyone's happy. It will all happen in the end. Okay. Thanks so much.